he doesn't have this beautiful individuality that should be celebrated. There will be a time when it is right for him to step into the full power that he is, but right now he's on the journey of alchemizing his emotions. This next era of his life will just be so beautiful and so fun. And right now he's experiencing some of the grief of letting go of his past life of being a child, and he does have stuff that's coming up from previous lifetimes that he knows how to alchemize. But to be honest, even though past life regression is very important and talking to me right now is very important and cool, this is available at all times, and Jack is being called to understand this and to tap into this by himself, with himself at all times, to be that himself, because he is it and so all is one.
Hello, beautiful people. Thank you so much for coming back to this space. Today, I have a topic that I am so excited to share with all of you guys. To be quite honest, the topic itself is a little bit out there, but it deeply excites me, so I couldn't resist recording this next episode about it, because with some of my closest friends, it's some of the things that I've just been wanting to share with them. I just want to share it because my experiences with this topic are so impactful, and they have become so foundational to the core of who I am as a human being. This is going to be a bit of a longer podcast, so buckle in. If you're on a drive, get into a nice trance. If you're going for a walk, enjoy the outdoors. Maybe you're doing some chores around the house. Maybe you're just laying on your bed listening to this, and if that's the case, that's cool. But either way, buckle in, because we are about to go for a crazy story journey. This is my experience with past life hypnotherapy. So I want to start off just by saying that thank you for being open-minded enough to click on this podcast. And I'd like to take it a step further just by saying that only for a moment, I'd like you to put your analytical mind, your mind that thinks, this is true, this is not true, this is what is actually going on, and this is what's not actually going on. I just want you to put that to the side for the duration of this podcast. I don't want you to analytically think about what's going on. And I'm just going to tell you this is my experience, and after this experience is over, you can assess if it falls into your worldview or if it doesn't. But while I'm telling it to you, just let the skeptical mind ride out. Because at the end of the day, if you took an iPhone or even this laptop back to people in, 400 AD, they would literally think that you're a magician. You can talk to anyone in the world instantaneously. You can speak into this random microphone and people can listen whenever you want. What I'm trying to say is that this universe is so much more complex than our current minds can fathom. And in addition to that, I believe that the human brain and the human experience is so much more complex than we understand as humans right now. So it's easy for me to have an open mind in this sense, just because I feel deeply aware of how little we know and understand as human beings. I'm always looking into different corners of society that I feel like are pushing the boundaries on consciousness and pushing the boundaries on our understanding of who we are as humans. And this just happens to be one corner that I've deeply fallen in love with. To start, I'd like to take you all the way back. I was studying in Bhutan in 2022. Bhutan, it was the fall of 2022, and Bhutan is this small country. It's to the east of Nepal. It's in the Himalayas, and they're a deeply Buddhist country. I ended up going to study there because I studied psychology in college, and Bhutan is one of the only, if not the only country in the world that takes into account the psychological well-being of their citizens when making decisions as a government. This has to do with their deeply Buddhist ties. It makes sense for them because the goal of Buddhism is enlightenment. And so the role of the government is, in this case, the constitutional monarchy, is to create fertile grounds for enlightenment amongst the citizens. So in response, the king and the monastic body work together to govern Bhutan. And one of those components includes, instead of using GDP, they use GNH, which is gross national happiness. It was so deeply beautiful studying in this country, engrossing myself in this culture. And while I was there, I got there in July, ended up leaving in December. Again, studied for 6 months. And being in this culture was night and day. It was totally different from the way that things that I just take for granted here in the US, like simple beliefs, like when you die, you get buried in a graveyard and, there's tombstones and you can go to visit your loved ones and leave them flowers. In Bhutan, it was totally different. There is a grief process when people die, but that's followed by a 30-day ceremony of prayer where you are praying for the soul as they transition from what they believed from this lifetime into the next one. And in addition, they don't bury their dead in graveyards. They cremate them and then they release their ashes back into nature because they believe that the body is just a vehicle for the soul. It's a vehicle for our consciousness, and that it's just as much, it is a deep component of who we are, but ultimately this body comes from the earth and it returns to the earth, and it is just one portion of our identity as ultimately what they believe who we are as spiritual beings. So yeah, this is my long way of saying that it's a very commonly understood thing in Bhutan, that reincarnation is a thing. I even went to a ceremony in Bhutan where there was this little 4-year-old boy and everybody stood and bowed when he entered. And he was wearing these robes and he was so upbeat, just a normal 4-year-old kid that you can imagine. But he was put in the most exclusive seating area of this ceremony. And yeah, he was being prayed to and worshipped, and he was giving out blessings to other people. And so I asked one of my Bhutanese friends what was going on. And they said that he is the reincarnation of Pema Lingpa, and that's one of their famous gurus. And so the monks noticed that, kind of like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, if any of you have watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, but essentially the monks figured out through a series of tests that this child is the reincarnation of this guru. And accordingly, he's brought into a monastery very early in his life, and he's trained and educated in the ways so that he may fulfill his duty of teaching about love and spirituality and truth, just as he did in his previous lifetimes. Or she, the soul is not one of gender. So I'm not sure if this is exactly what they believe in Bhutan, but this is what I've come to understand through my own experiences. So after being in this field of belief where reincarnation is so commonly understood, I went back to the US with a much more open mind about the way that we view life. And I kind of noticed that death in the US is very ambiguous. In Bhutan, it's very talked about. It's, yep, you go into reincarnation, and in every single lifetime, it's all about enlightenment. And eventually, throughout many, many lifetimes, you remember that you are God. You remember that you are the universe. You remember that you are connected to all things. They kind of view each lifetime as like a wave in the ocean. The wave comes into being, it peaks, and then it crashes, and then it returns back to the ocean before that water again becomes a new wave. That's how they view reincarnation. And eventually you realize, as a wave going through these unique experiences, that you're not actually a wave, but that you are the entire ocean. And that's enlightenment or nirvana. So anyway, not to be stuck up on that premise for too long, transitioning to what I was just talking about was that, yeah, death we don't really talk about here in the US. It's very ambiguous. It's very like this dark underbelly of society. You just like to pretend it doesn't happen. When your loved ones are dying, it's not, hey, they probably will die. Nobody ever says that. They just say, oh, they're not doing so great, or you just always want to believe like, oh, that person's doing well, they're doing well. Even if they're 94 years old, like they're doing well, even if they aren't doing well. Because again, it's just not something that you really talk about. And this has always felt unnatural to me. I think that death is a beautiful part of life. Of course, it's very, very difficult, and it's so hard letting go of our loved ones. As someone who's personally experienced this, grief is an incredibly powerful, encapsulating emotion that, yeah, it makes us question the very nature of our existence. And that can be very uncomfortable. And it's just really hard letting go of people that we love. And I think that it's beautiful because it questions the very nature of our existence. It questions this idea that are we really just human beings who are here just to prolong survival until we die? I've always felt like there's something more. I've always felt like there's something missing. And hearing the Buddhist take in Bhutan on reincarnation, it made more intuitive sense to me than our idea where it's kind of just, again, ambiguous. And even if though as a country, I think we're predominantly Christian still. Actually, yeah, I think I looked it up I looked it up like a month. It was probably like 6 months ago, and we're predominantly Christian still. I'll actually look it up real quick since we're all here for fun. Let's see, what is the most popular religion in the U.S.? Let's see. Yeah, so 63% in 2021 are Christian, and that includes Catholicism. 210 million people. So yeah, but even then, like the heaven and the hell, I don't know. It's more of just a gut feeling that this is a bit ambiguous. Obviously, there's no way for any of us to, firsthand confirm or deny this. Well, at least seemingly at first. Which segues into what I'm about to tell you, which is that I came back from Bhutan with this idea of reincarnation and death on my mind. And I remember that my mom, growing up, had read these books that were about reincarnation. And she had mentioned them to me in passing. It never really stuck with me. It didn't really intrigue me that much. I just thought, oh yeah, maybe that's true. Who knows? And coming back from Bhutan, I wanted to learn more about it. So I asked her more about who these people were. And the name that she gave me was this man named Brian Weiss. So I got one of Brian Weiss's books. It was called Many Lives, Many Masters. It's his first book. And I started reading it. And Brian goes into a story about how he was studying psychology in the 1970s. And he went to Yale. He went to Columbia in New York, that is, Columbia University. And he went to NYU. And then he did his residency to be a psychiatrist back at Yale. And so he was a very prolific, I hope I'm using that word right. He was a very well-known therapist, psychiatrist, and he was doing research all over the country. Speaking at conferences, this is a very smart dude that we're talking about here. I guess intelligence is all relative to begin with, but this guy's passion and intrigue in psychology and psychiatry cannot be understated. He was a big name at the time. And he noticed that he was reaching blocks with a lot of his patients. Some of his patients would come in with fears, with phobias, with this looming sense of depression or distress that it seemed like he couldn't quite get through to them. And so Brian, being the academic that he was and that he still is, looked into other alternative options. How can he expand his practice? How can he continue to grow it and improve it? And what he decided to do was he decided to start using hypnosis. And hypnosis was used by Freud. Freud obviously has some hot takes, but very famous psychologist. And Carl Jung as well. And Carl Jung was Freud's protege. So I'm 90% sure it was used by Carl Jung, but definitely used by Freud. And what Freud basically asserted was that our waking mind literally cannot exist in this society, in this world, if we were thinking about the darkest depths of our thoughts all the time. If we were thinking about the most traumatic events, if we were thinking about our deepest fears, we literally couldn't function in this world if those were always on our mind. So what we do is we learn to push those away, and they become unconscious at some point. And sometimes we push them away so much that it comes to the point where we don't even know how to access them anymore. We're just going through day-to-day life. We still have these deep feelings of fear or grief or darkness in the depths of our thoughts, but because they overwhelm us and we don't know what to do with them, or we don't feel safe enough to share them with anyone, or we don't feel comfortable enough admitting them to ourselves, we just form a whole identity around resisting those thoughts. And so Brian Weiss is reading this and he's like, yeah, that seems about right. We carry a lot of shame, and darkness is very, very scary. And so he turned to hypnotherapy. And what the premise is with hypnosis is it's nothing supernatural. All that Brian Weiss and Freud and perhaps Carl Jung and other hypnotists are doing is that they're creating a state where you feel safe, where you feel so relaxed, that no matter what you say, the person will accept you, that you're not physically in danger, you're not going to be judged. And the idea is that once you feel so safe and comfortable, you can start bringing these things to the surface, knowing that it is okay to share them. And naturally, these things are on your mind. So when you do slow down, the idea is that you're going to face these things that you've been processing. And maybe that's why so many of us spend so much of our life so busy, because we don't want to face these things that we're running away from. If this is you, this is me too. So it's totally okay. So let me take a sip of water real quick. I'm so excited. Brian Weiss starts integrating hypnosis into the work with his patients, and he's getting incredible results. There are times when he's hypnotizing patients and they remembered being raped as little kids, 3, 4 years old, totally repressed memory. There are times when they would be under hypnosis and they would remember being 1 or 2 years old and being deeply sick. And obviously we can't tap into those memories, but when you're under hypnosis, and scientifically your brain is in what's called the theta state, and it's the state right before you fall asleep. So we all experience it every day, and it's also right after we wake up. And so Brian would suspend people's states of mind right there. He would catch you right before you fall asleep by talking to you and directing you, by saying, what's going on? When did this symptom first arise? What is this depression really about? And once these patients would come face to face with the darkness and they would feel it, they would notice that they're okay, and they would be met with love by it. Their symptoms would go away, largely. And Brian was so happy that he was reaching this breakthrough, and so he keeps doing this hypnosis. He keeps hypnotizing his patients. However, in 1980, I think the book was actually published in 1980, he had a patient who he calls Catherine. Catherine is a pseudonym to protect her identity, but he has a patient called Catherine, and Catherine comes in and she has this deep phobia of drowning. Can't explain it. It's getting to the point where it's not even just a fear of drowning anymore. It's become a fear of water. She literally is having a hard time just functioning in day-to-day life. She's an anxious wreck. It's just tearing apart her life. And so she goes to Brian because she knows that Brian is well-renowned. He's an expert. And Brian says, okay, let's see what's going on. He does the normal work, the normal therapy. The normal therapy isn't working, which he presumed would happen. So the next session, or maybe it's a couple sessions, not sure, he decides to hypnotize her. And so he hypnotizes Catherine. She, after some practice, gets into a deep state of relaxation. He catches her right in this state right before you fall asleep. And he starts asking her, all right, Catherine, tell me more about this phobia you have of drowning. When did it first, let's go back to, or not when did it first arrive. He didn't say that at first. I'm talking in circles. He said, go back to when you were a child, 3, 4 years old. What do you notice? Nothing about drowning is essentially what she says. Okay, let's go back earlier. 1, 2 years old. What do you notice? He's thinking that she must have had an experience with drowning that she doesn't remember. But Catherine goes back to the 1, 2 year old era, still doesn't notice anything. Excuse me. So then he says, he's a bit frustrated, and he says, okay, well, go back to whenever you first had this symptom of a fear of drowning. And so Catherine is quiet for a couple minutes, and then she starts talking. And she says, I'm looking down at my body, and I'm tan. I'm wearing a white robe, and I'm in a village. And I'm in this village, and oh my gosh, and she starts panicking. I see this big water, it's coming. It's a huge wave, and it's going to flood our entire village. And she's panicking, and she's panicking, and she says, oh my gosh, all of us, we're all going to die. We're all going to be hit by this wave and die. And she's in distress. Brian doesn't know what's going on. And then she gets all relieved for a sudden. She says, oh my gosh, it's over. Everyone's dead, but we're all here. We're all still here. I still see everyone. We're not in our bodies anymore. Everything's okay. And Brian is like, okay, what the hell is going on? This is freaking weird. But Brian knew that the brain is incredibly complex, so he just thought that she was making up a story, and he rolled with it. So she talks about this story, and I might not have been getting those details exactly correct if any of you go back and read this book, but the premise is the same, that she has this fear of drowning, and she goes to a past life where her and her entire village drowns to death. So she comes out of this hypnosis not remembering much about what went on, and Brian asks her about it. Do you remember that at all? And she's just kind of like, no, but I feel really good. I feel a lot better. And many patients, when they're hypnotized, don't remember anything. Some remember, but many don't. I remembered all of mine, which we'll get to. But yeah, so Brian is super intrigued, just wondering what that is. And she comes back the next week, and she has no symptoms of anxiety, of fear. You know, she's not afraid of water anymore. She's going swimming. She's literally no sign that she was ever afraid of it. And Brian is just blown away. He's never seen anything like this, that someone just instantaneously got over this fear, this phobia of any sorts. So he's curious, and he says, okay, well, you paid for a session. Do you want to just keep going? Well, I'll hypnotize you again. We'll continue to integrate this and help you heal. She goes, okay, that sounds good. So Brian hypnotizes her again. And this time, instead of going back to another lifetime, or maybe she goes back to one lifetime, but after the lifetime's over, she says, there's someone here to see you. And Brian is super confused, and he's like, who do they say that they are? And she says, well, he says that he's your son and your grandpa. Your son and your grandfather are here. And Brian is very confused because his grandpa has been dead for multiple years, and his son has also been dead for multiple years. He had a son with his wife, who ended up dying about 20 days after the son was born. And they were unsure what was wrong with the kid. They knew something was wrong with his heart, but unsure of what was wrong. And they hadn't told anyone about it. They just screeched privately. This is before social media. So Brian says, what do they say that their names are? And the grandfather and the son say their names exactly as they were called. And then Brian he's retelling this story in the book, saying that he's getting the chills and he's getting really emotional. And he says, what do they have to say to me? And she smiles, Catherine smiles and says, they just want to let you know that they're totally okay and that they just love you so much. The son says that he was born with an upside down heart, but that was his purpose in this lifetime. He just wanted to come in and open up your heart, because that's what grief does. It opens up our heart. So he gives this deep message of love to Brian, and so does the grandfather, and they say that they're together and that they're there with him all the time, even when they don't see him. And Brian just starts bawling, crying. He's bawling his eyes out, and he cannot believe what he's heard. And this for him was enough to realize that she's actually talking to them. She's actually speaking with my son and my grandfather, even though they're not here. So Brian realized that this was true, that she was going to a place that was not just something that the mind was contriving, but that seemed to have some legitimate link to reality. So he goes home and he starts doing research, and he starts seeing that, number one, in a ton of cultures all around the world, Hinduism, Buddhism, reincarnation is a predominant belief. It's not weird at all. The idea that Catherine might have experienced drowning in a previous lifetime, or in fact that Catherine was living in another lifetime, or that the son and the father, even though they are not alive anymore, that their consciousness, their soul, is still alive somewhere. So he's getting more open-minded, and he also notices that at the University of Virginia, actually, I don't know if he notices this right away, but he started to notice that this is a lot more common than people like to give it credit for. At the University of Virginia, this institute is still a thing today. For the past 50 years, they've been doing, his name is Dr. Jim, I have it right here, did my preparation. Dr. Jim Tucker has been conducting research on children with past life memories. So lots of times children between the age of 2 and 5 start talking about another lifetime just very casually. There's a famous example on this website about this kid who said that he kept having recurring nightmares of a plane being shot down. And eventually, after working with Jim Tucker, they realized that he was recounting a past lifetime of himself in World War II, and they got his name. They said, "What is your name?" And his name was, I think his name was Houston. Oh man, I already forget the name, but they said this guy's name, and they looked back in the public records and pieced together this guy's life, and it was exactly the same as what this kid was saying. So let's say this guy's name is, Houston Smith. Houston Smith is this World War II pilot, and he did get shot down in a plane. They had a ceremony for him, and he grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's where the kid said that he grew up in when he was asked, even though, again, he had not looked at any of these records. So Brian Weiss is discovering more about this and learning that it's actually a lot more common than we like to give it credit for as a collective. And he's starting to notice that there are other people around the country who are doing the same thing, including one woman named Dolores Cannon. And maybe some of you have heard the name Dolores Cannon. She's popular in some circles, like some spirituality circles. But Dolores Cannon had been doing similar work. She used hypnosis to help her lose weight in the 60s, and then started practicing actually in the late 70s. She revisited it, but started working with other people in the late 70s to help them, with weight loss. But she eventually stumbled into the same phenomenon where she was hypnotizing patients, and they were going into previous lifetimes, or they were having experiences where they would talk to, quote unquote, the other side. So I'm reading all about this, and I find it so interesting. The thing that I find the most interesting is not that we reincarnate, but Brian and Dolores, well, I'm mostly reading Dolores' protege, whose name is Sarah Cosme, but both of them are kind of mapping this space in between lifetimes. They're kind of mapping the journey of the soul. And they're asking people on the other side, what do you see? Who are you with? Why are you here? What is the soul doing? Are we just reincarnating perpetually? What is going on here? And they both came to nearly identical maps of the soul. So what they find is that the lifetime of the soul, and again, this is based on their findings, asking many different patients who've never met each other, all who are deeply hypnotized. Maybe I should make that a little bit more clear. So in the same way that Catherine talked to Brian's grandpa and Brian's son, while these patients are hypnotized, they can also talk to other spiritual beings. And I know that sounds a little bit trippy. It sounds a little bit taboo. It sounds a little bit out there. But essentially what they're doing is they're talking to, Dolores called it the subconscious. So Dolores called it the higher self, essentially. They're talking to the deepest part of you that is connected to the whole universe and remembers that it is the universe experiencing itself. And so this subconscious, this deep part of us, and I'm going to show you guys here before the end of the podcast what it sounded like when my hypnotist, Rose, was talking to my subconscious. But this subconscious is connected to the energetic field of reality. And so it can just talk about, essentially it's a database of just information that humans consciously don't have access to. But deep within us, it's an ever-present part of who we are. So what they found from talking to this subconscious or the subconscious of other people is a few things. The first thing that they found was that the journey of the soul is not so dissimilar from the journey of us humans, except for that in the same way that we humans, we go through our days. Each day, maybe we're learning a lesson, we're experiencing new things. But imagine that, each day or each month, instead of it just being a month, it's a lifetime. So you have one lifetime, you learn these lessons, you go to another lifetime, you learn these lessons, you experience these new things. Maybe one lifetime you're a girl, maybe one you're a guy, maybe one you're super rich, maybe one you're poor, maybe one you're black, maybe one you're white. But essentially, the whole idea is to remember love, to see yourself in all things. It's a very, very, very beautiful thing. And something that I thought was really cool that I have to include here is that what they found was that who you judge in a given lifetime Say that you're judging someone who is really rich, the rich are the worst, or you're judging someone who is a different religion, or you're judging someone who is a different sexual orientation. Your soul will come out of that lifetime and review your life. This is what they found from their studies, is that after you die, you review your lifetime and you think about what you experienced and what you want to learn. So say you judge someone who was a different, you know what, this is going to be the best one ever. Say that you were judging someone who was a different side of the political spectrum. In the next lifetime, you will incarnate as a person who is a part of that side of the political spectrum that you were judging. So say that you judge conservatives all the time. Oh, conservatives, they don't understand. They're so selfish, blah, blah, blah. Your soul will come out of that lifetime and say, I want to see myself in that conservative. I don't want to view myself as separate from this person. And so in the next lifetime, you will actually incarnate as a conservative. It's really, really cool. They notice this phenomenon thousands of times with people talking about their previous lifetimes. So that's the first thing, is that your goal with all of this as a soul is to remember love. That's it. You're just remembering that you're love, and that you're free. It's really beautiful. The second thing that they found, which these are just my 3 favorite personally. Well, I guess really now we're on the 3rd because I talked about the judgment thing. But the next thing that they found, which blew me away, that I thought was so cool, is that you actually reincarnate with similar souls throughout your lifetimes. So this is what they called in Brian Weiss's books and in Sarah's, I think same label, but it's called your soul family. And if you think about it, the way that it was described in the book is, if you think about a tree, there's this big root, and then one branch branches off, and then that branch goes into other branches, which go into twigs. And so all of us as souls are connected on this tree of life. We're all part of the same tree. But some of us as little twigs, or maybe let's pretend that we're all little leaves. Some of us leaves are closer to each other than other leaves. So even though we're all connected in the same way, groups of souls incarnate together. So if you have someone in this life who you just feel so connected to, or maybe it's a family member, maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your brother, but maybe it's someone who you just randomly met and you guys get along so weirdly well. It's like, I feel like I've known you forever. Well, you actually might have known them forever. In fact, you might have experienced many, many, many lifetimes together. In addition, and this part's just so freaking cool, the idea of soulmates, they talk about a ton. Actually, Brian Weiss has a whole book about it. But souls who have fallen in love in previous lifetimes, they choose to come back over and over and fall in love all over again in lifetimes to come. So maybe one lifetime, you're a guy and she's the girl, or maybe one lifetime she's the guy and you're the girl. But you incarnate together just because you want to experience falling in love with each other again. And it's freaking insane. It's so freaking cool. And Brian asked, why? Why do souls continue to incarnate together? Why not experience all the other souls? And the answer was simple. Just because they love each other. They just want to keep incarnating together because they want to keep experiencing life together. So super freaking cool. I'm sure you all have that person in your own life. If you're listening to this, if you are still listening to this, thank you so much. But yeah, I'm sure you all have people in your life that you just feel so connected to. Chances are you've experienced many different lifetimes with them in many different forms. And those forms change. One lifetime, they're your brother. One lifetime, they're your best friend. Could be whatever. But the form is irrelevant. The thing that's relevant is that you guys keep choosing to incarnate together because you love each other. So yeah, I guess I'll keep those in my 3 things that both books found interesting. I feel like I'm missing one more thing that I wanted to touch on. The souls incarnate together. The point of all of this is love. Another thing, this will be the perfect segue. Another thing that these books talked about that was super interesting is that after talking to the subconscious kept saying that we as humans are at a very, very interesting point in the human journey where we are transitioning out of one density of consciousness into a higher density of consciousness. And this is just a fancy way for saying that we're upgrading. We are learning so much more in every single facet. And it's a very, very fragile and important time here on this planet. And it's really, really, really beautiful. And that's why there's so many people here to experience it, because they all want to experience Earth upgrading. And this upgrade is not in terms of, oh, we're getting AI, oh, we're getting faster jets. It's actually an emotional evolution. So for a long time, we've been living at a very low vibe emotionally, and we're actually jumping into a much higher vibe right now. So we're going to be more happy, free, playful, loving. All of these things is what the next iteration of the human journey is about, according to these books. Which I'm like, okay, no wonder everybody wants to come here. Like, this is sick. We all we're re-remembering how to play. Like, what better time to be alive than to re-remember how to play and to enjoy life and to love and to have fun. So yeah, many souls right now are here for this, and they all want to experience it, which is super freaking cool. So that, for me, after reading all this information, I'm like, okay, I gotta check this out. Like, this is way too interesting. I'm so curious. What are my previous lifetimes as a soul? Like, right now I'm Jack, really John Elliott Birding. Got my red hair, got my freckles, 6'1", single. I'm just kidding. This is not yo, what's up? This is not my Tinder. But yeah, this is who I am in this lifetime. I wonder what I would have been like in previous lifetimes. Like, who am I as a soul? Are we really just all out here way older than we think that we are? And so, yeah, I'm reading all about this, and I look it up, and in Cincinnati, there is a hypnotherapist. Her name is Rose. There's probably multiple, but Rose was the most credible one that I found, or one that I resonated the most with energetically. Just felt like the right vibe. And I got it for a graduation present, which is perfect. Mom, if you're watching this, thank you so much for really listening to this. And so I went to check it out. And I went to Rose, and she's just the most lovely, sweet, comforting person of all time. I mean, even just hearing her talk, I'm like, she's perfect for this. Like, I just feel so comfortable, and I feel like I'm slowly like drooping in, listening to her voice, like melting into relaxation. And so Rose starts by talking, and essentially she asks, share whatever you're comfortable with. But the point is that we want to start with an hour and a half of you telling me, well, hour and a half is how long it took me, but it could be 30 minutes. Basically, I'm telling her as much as I can about my life. And I'm telling her as much as I can so that I'm as comfortable as possible around her. And we're going to use these experiences and challenges that I'm going through in my life to help create a map for the hypnotherapy session. Because the goal of hypnotherapy, it's not just to review your past life memories, it's also to heal. These patients are coming out of these hypnotherapy sessions healing phobias, healing traumas, healing depression, literally just reintegrating their identity, reforming their identity. The stories are just incredible that are in these books. And something else I forgot to mention is that they're also healing physically. And this is the part where it just gets insane. There are recorded instances of people coming into these hypnotherapy sessions with AIDS, cancer, diabetes, flesh wounds, heart conditions, kidney diseases, vision issues, and other medical conditions. And that's straight from the record of Dolores Cannon. They're coming in with all of these sicknesses and conditions and coming out of these QHHT sessions. QHHT stands for Quantum Healing Hypnotherapy Technique. They're coming out of these hypnosis sessions healed. These ailments totally gone, and they're labeled in the medical community as a rapid remission, and the cause of it is unknown. But in these sessions, when you tap into that innermost part of you that's still holding on to this baggage, you can use bringing it into your awareness to promote vast healing. And Dolores asserted that you can actually heal anything if your soul does not want to choose to hold on to it anymore. So we even learn sicknesses. We even experience sicknesses because it's part of how we learn to remember love. And that doesn't mean that the sicknesses don't suck. It just means that it's an experience that's designed to open up our hearts, to make us more empathetic, to make us more gentle. So we talk, and I tell her everything about my life, literally everything that I can think of that feels relevant. And I'm feeling deeply comfortable around her. And so then I go in for the hypnotherapy session. Well, actually, I remember first I went pee, but then I went into the hypnotherapy session. And I lay down. I'm super comfortable. I trust Rose so much at this point, and she's just the best. And I'm laying down, and without telling you, the complete specifics of this, because, actually, I mean, you don't need to hear like all the specifics. I'll just tell you kind of how it went. So essentially what they do is they prime your brain. Rose primed my brain for the session. And so what I did was we talked about before how we were going to put my waking consciousness, the one that's always looking out for problems, we were going to find a happy place in my head. For me, it was, and we all have a happy place. And she said, we're going to put your consciousness there. And so for me, she's hypnotizing me. She's calming me down, focus on your breath. And then she's saying, think of images, think of a yellow flower, think of a black cat, different stuff. And then she said, this is the part of your brain that we'll be working with. And then she said, now I want you to imagine your happy place. What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? If there's food involved, imagine it as vividly as you can. And I want you to put your anxious consciousness there. Not anxious. She said your waking consciousness there. And know that this is a place where everything's okay. This is never a place that you can be harmed. This is a place where everything's okay. And so that's what I did. I'm literally in Montana with my stepbrothers and my stepdad, and I feel so at peace. I'm literally bawling my eyes out as I'm there. And I just feel so happy. I'm like, wow, I feel so peaceful, so peaceful. And then she says, now I want you to take your consciousness. And I should also say, don't try this at home, kids. She's a trained professional. But she says, now I want you to take your consciousness and I want you to hover to a cloud. Pick out a cloud in the sky, imagine it vividly, and I want you to hover to this cloud. And so I'm on this cloud, I'm chilling, feeling like the king. I can just see everything. It's so sick. I'm seeing all the mountains around me. I'm seeing my little house underneath me, little cabin. And she says, now this cloud is a unique cloud because it's actually a magical cloud. This cloud can take you anywhere in time and space that you want to go. So whenever you're ready, listen to wherever you want to go, to whatever your deepest self, your higher self wants to see, and go here. And so I'm sitting there and I'm really like right in between the state. The best way I can describe it is it really does feel like I'm about to fall asleep. And my mind just took off. And I was a little bit skeptical at first of what I was seeing, because it was just different. I mean, it was so different. And to go into detail, what I experienced was that I was a boy. I was 16 years old, and I was in what felt like, and I'm describing this all to Rose. She's asking me questions. What time period does it feel like you're in? She asked that a little bit farther down the road. But what are you wearing? Tell me, what do you see? And so what I saw was that I was this boy, and I was in my body. I was pale. I was wearing very old-fashioned looking clothes, and I was on this stage. And I'm on the stage, and I'm looking out, and it's dark, very dark, because I guess it makes sense. There's no electricity, but it's still light enough. Like there are candles lit, and there's a big audience of people there to see me. It's really hot, a little stinky. But I'm on the stage and I'm holding a mandolin, which is so weird. I didn't even know what the frick a mandolin was. Now I do. It's a pretty cool instrument. Check it out if you haven't. But I'm holding this mandolin and I'm playing this music, and I'm just an expert at this song. Like, it is unbelievable. And she's asking me questions like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm playing a concert. And then she said, why? And I said, well, there are people here from all around the world to see me. They're starting a new life, and there's so much chaotic energy in the atmosphere right now that I view it as my purpose being here to remind us that ultimately here as human beings, we are here to prosper, to grow, and to love. And that's what my music is about. And I start getting super emotional, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, like, wow, this is who I am. I'm a musician. at least in this lifetime. I don't know how to play anything today, but ever since I started playing the piano, so, good vibes. But yeah, and then she says she's asking me more questions about it, who are you with? Do you see anyone that looks familiar? And I didn't notice anyone that seemed familiar from other lifetimes, but I did have memories, which I'll get to, where I did experience this. But yeah, then she says, fast forward to the next relevant time in this lifetime. And so I fast forward, and I'm walking across the street with my mandolin, and I actually get hit by a horse in a carriage, and I die suddenly. I hit my head on the concrete and just die. And yeah, I'm like, my soul feels super light. I feel super free. I'm not feeling the space in between. I think that I wasn't as deep as some of these other patients were, because yeah, I just wasn't mapping anything after my death. That was it. Like, it just felt like the end of what I was being shown. And yeah, so she said, oh, wow. Well, yeah, so she asked about that, and then she said, what are your lessons for that life? And I said that my lessons are that who I am as a soul is I'm here to help bring people together in times of change. I'm here to help us remember love, and I'm here to help us remember who we are. And that's what I was doing when I was playing music. And I'm seeing this memory, by the way, and it's a lot more vivid than a dream. And the thing that makes it the most different is that, well, number one, obviously I'm awake. I remember all of this. And number two, it's highly emotional. Like, it didn't feel like a dream where you wake up and you come out of it and you're like, oh, but that wasn't real. It was way, 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 way more vivid and way more emotional than a dream. Yeah, a lot more vivid, a lot more emotional than a dream. It just felt different. And yeah, so then it was an incredible experience. And since then, there was another lifetime as well, but I've done this twice now. The other time that I was doing it with Rose, it was with a group, so it wasn't as directed, but I had a lifetime where I was, same thing, she hypnotizes you, but she did it with the whole group, and I'm seeing these images. And in this other lifetime, I was a Native American woman, and this was the most vivid experience I had had. Again, this is a few months later. I'm tan, I have brown hair, and I'm seeing everybody around the village, and I feel the energy of my mom there. I feel the energy of my friend Omar there, which is super freaking weird. And I see in this lifetime that I married this very handsome man, which was, yeah, super weird, obviously. Like, I'm a 24-year-old guy, and I'm straight, but I'm also LGBTQ plus for all you legends out there. But yeah, I'm vividly seeing this memory. This was a couple weeks ago, and I see that, I eat meals in this teepee, and that there are people all around me in the circular shape. It makes so much sense. We're all facing each other. We're all telling stories. It's so beautiful. And in this lifetime, I'm a healer. That's my purpose in the village. I carry around this stick with feathers on it, and I lay people down in front of me, and I put these porcelain bowls all over their body. And I can literally, in this flashback, I can see the energy leaving their body as I'm moving this stick, which, yeah, was just obviously unbelievable and so visceral. And in this lifetime, I just felt like it was a lifetime of so much love, of deep, deep, deep love. I could feel the community and the connection around me. And it made me so nostalgic at the past. I came out of this session feeling like it makes no sense that our living rooms today are all facing the TV. It's like the TV is the best storyteller, when really, we are our own best storytellers. Just like I'm telling you guys this story right now. Not that there's anything wrong with TV either. We got some good shows out there. Which brings me back to my other lesson that I learned from my life as a musician. And sorry, I'm going a bit all over the place. I'm just a little bit excited and slightly self-conscious because I'm just starting this off. Let me take a sip of water. Okay. So I told you about my lifetime as a Native American woman. This I experienced during a different hypnosis session, very similar to the one that I experienced as a musician, but this is just a few months apart. So bouncing in between these two lifetimes that I experienced, going back to the lifetime as a musician briefly, I also came out of this session feeling a deep sense of nostalgia for the fact that we don't prioritize or emphasize live music like we used to. I figured out that during this time, I was in the Bronx in New York City in the 1700s, late 1700s, when everybody was moving to the New World. I felt it so vividly. I knew that I was there. It was just so powerful. And I also felt like I was a cobbler on the side, and I would help people fit shoes, and that my grandfather and I, who were both from the old world, we would help. We were very unique cobblers because they would take their shoes and imprint them into clay, and we would make them a custom sole based on this imprint. And so people loved us all around the Bronx because of what we did. And this to me is, again, just, I can't even tell you how random it is. Like, this just has nothing to do. The one thing I will say is that when I was a kid, I loved shoes so much. It was my favorite thing to do was go shoe shopping. Another thing is that I've always felt deeply inspired by music, to the point where sometimes I wonder if I'm just doing the total wrong thing with this, whatever I'm doing with my life right now, podcast, trying to tell stories. I think music is in the cards there as well. But yeah, so I will say it does feel like a very intrinsic part of who I am, despite the randomness of how it's not correlated to this life. Yeah, so then where it got really interesting is that in the first session, after I talked about my lifetime as a musician and a cobbler, and I had one other lifetime, but for the sake of, not telling you the whole session because it's long, after the lifetime as a musician, we then talked to my subconscious. And so she says, okay, now I'd like to speak with Jack's subconscious. And suddenly I was laying on the table, but this was all just so lucid and weird. I felt very disoriented. I just didn't feel like I was on the table anymore. I felt like I was somewhere else. And when she asked to speak to my subconscious, it was almost like, the only thing that I can describe it is it's like I was sitting in a chair observing someone else speaking through me. It was super weird. I'm going to attach a clip that you guys can listen to here. But essentially what it was like was that the only way that I can describe it is when you go pee, for example, the pee's coming out and you're not actively thinking, oh, I'm peeing. You just decide, pee, and then everything just flows out. It was the same way with this. I just decided speak, and I just started almost vomiting these words out of me. Very high level, spiritual, intelligent vocabulary that I had no idea where it was coming from. I mean, legitimately no idea, and I still don't. It's taken me a very long time to integrate exactly what happened. But yeah, I'm going to attach a clip right now, and you guys can just decide for yourselves what you think. But before, real quick, sorry to tease you. The format of this is that Rose and I, after we came up with questions about my life, or after I told her so much about my life, we came up with questions that I wanted to ask my subconscious, my higher self. And so I asked him, we formed a ton of questions that are all about where I am in my life, why I feel lost. And I was just hoping to get a sense of clarity. In this particular excerpt, I had just answered a question about why I've had some interesting romantic encounters in the past year. And you can hear Rose start to kind of make sense of that. And then my subconscious is going to just kind of take it in its own direction. So without further ado, check it out.
Yes. And so as he shifts within his own, maybe as he realizes through this process, where he is with the fear, this all then subsides. He's able to draw to him a soul who does have that ability, and that he has the ability of resonating with where it is sustainable.
He has so much shame about his power is the biggest thing right now, because it is so powerful. And in the past, he has been a human being that has shared these powers with the world at a time when they weren't ready, and he was rejected for it. And now he's being called to do similar things in those lifetimes. And though he understands that pain is a mere byproduct of duality, he also understands that pain is a very, very real feeling. And having a limited human experience in the past, he has attempted to share those teachings with the world, teachings that are still shared today, but this is the time, and the time is now, and the world is ready. And those past lifetimes that him and the collective, he and the collective, she and the collective, us as the collective that we have all shared with each other, it has all been leading up to right now where we are turning a page. And the new age spirituality is not arbitrary. It is because we are turning into a new age of earth, except for it is important that people understand that religion is too easily used as a way to resist the pain and fear that they already are, just as you two were talking about before you come into this room. But we are finally starting to understand that. In the same way that when one movement emerges, there's always a countercultural movement. Eventually, there can be no countercultural movement because we're moving out of duality into non-duality, embracing the aspect of us that wants to resist ourselves and the aspect of us that just wants to be ourselves. It is all about knowing, being, yin, yang, fear, love, doing, and reception. It's all the same. It's all non-duality. And we don't seem to understand that because we are all at war within ourselves. And we are at war within ourselves, and that's being mirrored as the collective, as this world is dying. We are the world, we are the planet, and we are killing ourselves. Global warming can't exist. It's not that humans are killing the planet, it's that the planet is killing themselves in the same way that we are committing suicides and murders. We are killing ourselves because we are resisting our pain, and we don't know what to deal with it because we live in a low vibrational society where everybody is resisting the darkness. And for so long we thought that that's the way forward, is to resist darkness, to resist darkness. But now it's not about resisting darkness, it's about being the darkness. It's about embracing the darkness and integrating the darkness and realizing that you are it, you are everything. And it's about, in that way, re-remembering how to live. Alchemy is why I'm alive. It's the most beautiful thing in all of life. You take a rock and you turn it to gold. It's symbolic for taking these horrible experiences and making them beautiful in the same way that he did during Kairos. That's why he felt so beautiful, because he was able to take things that are low vibrational and see the beauty, not just in the way that they are high vibrational, but just to see that they are two sides of the same coin, and why we chose this and how we chose this and who we are. And in that way, we can also feel so deeply connected with each other. In vulnerability and pain, it presents unparalleled opportunities to feel connected with other people. Because if you can take vulnerability and pain, which at the core are disconnection, and use it as a way to connect with other people, that is a love that is truly unconditional, that truly lasts forever, that is truly the infinite. Pain, fear, and shame are the window into infinity, and we are finally starting to understand this as a human species. Jack understands this better than most people today, which is cool because it will be very, very fun for him in this lifetime, and he knows this. But it is important that he takes his struggles and he doesn't use spiritual practices and he doesn't use psychology as a way to resist his pain and his fear and his judgment and the things that he feels so much shame about. But it is also important for him to understand that there's nothing wrong with his power, there's nothing wrong with his individuality. Even though he is a cell that is of the soul, the cells of the feet, of the hands, they create this human experience that is so beautiful. And in the same way, it is important for him to understand that he doesn't need to feel bad about his power. He doesn't need to feel like he doesn't have this beautiful individuality that should be celebrated. There will be a time when it is right for him to step into the full power that he is, but right now he's on the journey of alchemizing his emotions. This next era of his life will just be so beautiful and so fun. And right now he's experiencing some of the grief of letting go of his past life of being a child, and he does have stuff that's coming up from previous lifetimes that he knows how to alchemize. But to be honest, even though past life regression is very important and talking to me right now is very important and cool, this is available at all times, and Jack is being called to understand this and to tap into this by himself, with himself at all times, to be that himself, because he is it and so all is one.
So yeah, as you can tell, that does not like really sound like who I am today. Again, I remember everything. I don't know where that voice was coming from, but for me, it was enough to personally experience to believe that this is a real thing, that hypnosis, hypnotherapy, these past lives that I was experiencing are actually past lives that I experienced. This has really helped me in my worldview because it has helped me to remember that, number one, that I am not a human being having a spiritual experience, but that I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. It's helped me to look at life so much more in depth. It's helped me to remind myself that the ultimate goal of this is to see myself in all things and to enjoy it, to have fun. These books are so cool because they not only talk about stories of other human beings, but they also help to piece together aspects of the human journey that we've forgotten. They paint a much more vivid picture of the times of Jesus. They've regressed patients who were with Jesus during the time that he was speaking. They've helped to flesh out memories of past civilizations that we've since forgotten, like Atlantis. Atlantis was a real place, it was a real city, and it was destroyed by a flood. They talk about this in the books. And so many other very, very beautiful concepts that are about the very nature of our existence and what we are doing here on this planet. So I just threw a lot of information at you guys. I'm going to let you sit with it, integrate it. Again, this is enough for me, being myself, that I very much believe that this is a real thing. I think that the Buddhists are 100% on it, as are the Hindus. I also believe that I know that there are certain portions of the gospel, I think it's the Gospel of Thomas, that's not in the new Roman Catholic Bible, that alluded to the fact that Jesus spoke about reincarnation. So obviously the Bible we see today has been edited thousands of times. That's not to take away any of the integrity or the beauty of the Bible, but it's also coming with the open-minded understanding that the Bible is edited according to the times that it is needed, and the current edition that, well, the foundation of a lot of Catholicism is based on the Roman Empire. That was a blend. It was religious syncretism, so a blending of two religions between the Roman sun worshippers and Catholicism. And Alexander, I believe it was Alexander the Great, in AD 382, decided that he was going to be Catholic instead of a sun worshiper, and he integrated the two religions together in this new form of the Bible to help convert people from the sun worshippers into Catholicism. That's why it's Sunday, the day of worship for the Catholic Church. It's the day of worshiping the sun. Hey guys, just future Jack Huffington right here. It was actually Constantine the Great, and it was in the early AD 300s that he made the switch. And after he made the switch declaring Rome as Christian, he actually continued to worship Sol Invictus, or the sun, in private. So very interesting. It was more of a political move than a personal move. Long story short, I think that there are so many aspects of the human journey that we've forgotten. I don't think it's so out of the question that reincarnation is the real thing. And I hope that through my own experiences sharing with you about, my experience with past life hypnotherapy, I've helped you maybe open up your mind or question the very nature of your own existence. I think that all of us are such beautiful, beautiful souls on a journey that is so much larger, more beautiful and complex than our little human minds can understand. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.